Welcome to a walkthrough of the K-2 Skills Unit Internalization. Kindergarten, first, and second grade teachers should complete this unit internalization template prior to beginning a skills unit. The unit internalization template helps teachers identify the learning goals of each unit and plan effective daily instruction to meet these goals and should be completed prior to starting any new unit. As you see on the screen in front of you, this is the template that you will be utilizing. It is the K-2 Skills Unit Internalization. This template is divided into 4 components. All 4 of these components can be found in your teacher guide for each skills unit. The 4 components include the unit introduction, teacher resources, pausing point, and yearly scope and sequence. We are going to be utilizing Grade 1, Unit 1 Teacher Guide to walk through this planning process. The first portion of our planning, as I said, will be using the unit introduction in your teacher guide. Let's go to that teacher guide now. Here is Grade 1 Skills Unit 1 Teacher Guide. As I scroll through the teacher guide, you will notice that all teacher guides begin with a table of contents. This table of contents overviews the daily lessons that are included in this particular unit. This table of contents will also be useful as we look for the different components that we will be using in the unit internalization. The first part that we will be using is the introduction. Because this is the first unit of this grade level, I want to show you all of the information that is included in every unit introduction. It is a wealth of information that is very important for you to spend time reading through prior to teaching your first skills unit. The beginning part of the unit introduction starts with a welcome letter to you. It highlights the key aspects of the skills strand that you will be teaching. It also looks at the different components that are included in each skills strand. It goes on to break down those components into teacher components with descriptions of those, and student components, including those descriptions as well. Some other pieces that are included in the unit introduction are different unit and lesson features that you will see throughout your teacher guide. Once I get to the unit organization portion, that's what I'm going to be using for the first part of my unit internalization planning. It lays out the lessons as well as what is going to be focused on, what foundational skills. Because this is the first unit, there's a back to school portion where we're really going to be focusing on getting our students reacquainted to our daily routines and exercises. We're also going to do a placement assessment in the beginning, and then we get into lessons that are going to be reviewing sound spelling correspondences. Because this is Unit 1 of Grade 1, it is a review unit. The first 2 units of the curriculum review the previous foundational skills from the grade before. So these sounds are review sound spelling correspondences that were taught in kindergarten. There are multiple sound spelling correspondences that I need to make sure my students have mastered in this first unit of study. These are those foundational skills that I will be recording in my first portion of my unit internalization. As you can see, I've chosen to digitally add this information into my template, but you can choose to either use this as a digital planning tool or you can print it off and write in it yourself. This is a tool for you to plan for your upcoming unit. So how you record that information is totally a personal preference, as well as what information stands out to you as the important pieces to include. I've chosen to list all of those short vowel sounds that were highlighted in my introduction in the teacher guide, as well as those consonant sounds that I will be reviewing. I need to make sure this is a good reminder for me at the beginning of the year of which particular sound spelling correspondences my students need to know, and this will help me guide how I'm making sure that all my students have mastered these. We're going to continue on to the second step in our unit internalization, and as you can see, we'll continue to use that unit introduction component. This second question says, what does the unit introduction tell us to consider when teaching the unit? As I continue to scroll through my unit introduction, you will notice that directly after those foundational skills, there are notes that are provided on the sound spellings correspondences that I will be teaching, and in this case, reviewing. This portion of the unit introduction provides hints and explanations about how to teach the particular foundational skills in this unit. These pedagogical tips will vary depending on the focus of each unit. So let's take a look at some of the specifics provided for Grade 1, Unit 1 in my teacher guide introduction. You'll notice that there are different categories, including sound combinations, consonant digraphs, double letter spellings, and tricky spellings. I'm going to want to read through all of these in detail so I can pick up those tips and explanations that I feel will be most useful for me as I am planning for Unit 1. For example, when I read through the consonant digraph section, it reminded me what a digraph was, that it's two letters that stand for a single sound, but it also pointed out that it's not necessary for my students to use that term. I may choose to use letter team instead. It did tell me what was important for my students to understand, and that is that a letter can stand for a single sound all by itself, or it can work with a second letter to stand for a single sound. It also gave me that explanation or hint that some students may need extra practice with consonant digraphs. That's important for me in planning for my unit, and I definitely will include that in my planning template. I wanted to show which different pieces of information I chose to record and how. I just did a bulleted list of all those different explanations and hints that stood out to me that I wanted to make sure I focused on, including those consonant digraphs I just read through, but also things like tricky spellings for the v and the f sound, because they're spelled the same way, but they make different sounds. So I'm going to want to make sure I spend some time with my students explaining that. We're going to move on to the last part of our unit internalization that utilizes the unit introduction. In this particular section, I'm focusing on what additional materials I will need to prepare to support all learners, including English language learners, gifted and talented, students with disabilities, and so on. Again, I'm going to go back into my unit introduction. I'm going to continue to scroll past those hints and explanations that I just went through for step 2 until I get to the portion where it directly lays out the additional materials I need for Unit 1. These materials are typical materials that teachers have on hand within their classroom, but it's important that we have these readily available for us prior to teaching Unit 1 in the curriculum. You'll notice that some of these items listed in additional materials are required for every student, such as scissors for every student. Some of the materials are listed as optional. Again, it is up to your discretion, knowing your students and their needs, which optional materials you choose to include, as well as which of the other additional materials that you want to have on hand. They give an example of you can have a world map or a globe. You'll notice I choose to include both of them in my materials. I've made a chart so I can just cross off those materials as I gather them prior to teaching this unit. Again, I included things such as both a world map and globe. I listed those index cards that I needed in both white and yellow. And I also included both of the optional materials listed. I know how helpful it is for my students to have handheld mirrors as they are making the sound so they can see what their mouth does with the sound, especially for my students who have dyslexia. That's a great reinforcement as they're making the sounds. I also know how important it is to have an alphabet chart out for those students who need that additional support. So I included both of those materials in my planning template. We're now going to move on to the second component, which is teacher resources. We're going to use this teacher resource component to answer this question. What additional materials are provided in the teacher resources section of the teacher guide? Let's go there now. Again, I'm going to go back to that table of contents. The teacher resources are listed at the end of the teacher guide, so I'm going to scroll through all of the lessons that are included in this first unit to get to the teacher resource section, but it gives me the exact page number that I need to go to. In this particular unit, it's page 387, so I'm going to take you there now. As soon as you get to this section in your teacher guide, you will notice that there are several resources available to you. In this particular unit, you'll notice there are planning sheets, assessments, observation records, anecdotal records, additional activity pages, the activity book answer key, a TEKS correlation chart, and an ALPS correlation chart. It's very important that you spend time scrolling through all of these different resources to determine which ones you want to have access to or set aside as you move through this unit of study. Because there are so many amazing resources available for you, it's important that you take the time to read through them because you obviously won't be able to use all of them, but you will find particular resources that will be very useful for you as you're teaching this unit. I'm scrolling through and you're noticing different recording sheets, and then I'm getting to a section where there are activity pages. So these are additional activity pages that focus again on skills that are taught within the unit. And these activity pages are intended to provide additional support to help your students master the different skills. So you'll see page after page of games, cards for you to cut out, all to reinforce the different foundational skills that you are covering within the unit. I'm going to scroll down even further so I can show you some of the other resources that are included. So you'll notice here, these are the activity book answer keys. So from the student activity books, these are the answer keys that go along with them. So that's a great additional resource for you to have access to. And as you continue to scroll down, you will also see that TEKS correlation chart as well as the ALPS correlation chart. All of these resources are right in your teacher guide. So I sifted through all these additional materials and I grouped them by which resources I thought would help me with planning, with assessment, and with my observation of my students. And I listed those particular resources that were part of this component in my teacher guide so I could easily access those as I work through my unit. We're going to now move on to the next component, which is a pausing point. Every unit has pausing points that occur for a few days after students take the end of unit assessment. These activities are provided to help you address the individual needs of your students based on the end of unit assessment analysis. We will be using the pausing point activities in the step 5 of our planning, where we think about possible student misconceptions, which pausing point activities we anticipate having to complete, and why. So for example, students often struggle differentiating the I and sounds. So I anticipate having to complete the hear medial sounds activity in this unit. Let me take you to the pausing point activities in your teacher guide now so we can scroll through them. Just as we saw with the teacher resources, you will notice the pausing point section of your teacher guide is a wealth of information and activities provided for you. The exercises that are included in the pausing point component are listed by unit objectives. This makes it easy for you to scroll through all of the different activities that are included to really meet the specific needs of your students. So for example, if I'm noticing that my students are struggling with blending and segmenting, or I may have just a handful of students who are struggling with that, there are multiple different activities that I can look through and determine which one I want to use to help support building that foundational skill. As I said, you may use some of these for whole group, some of them for small group, and some for individual student needs. In the same light, I may have students who are struggling reading one-syllable words. So there are several different pausing point activities that are included that I can choose from. It's important that you spend time going through this pausing point section, pulling out those particular activities that you want to use in the unit. As you can see, I again categorize these. I know blending and segmenting is a foundational skill that's very important for my students to master, and sometimes I have students that struggle, so I pulled a couple of those pausing point activities to reinforce. I also know that the spelling of the k sound is something that can be very tricky for students because there are 4 different ways to spell that sound, so I pulled some activities that will help reinforce the spelling of the k sound. I did the same with tricky words as well as writing. We're now at the final point of our unit internalization template, which is utilizing the yearly scope and sequence. We're going to utilize this component in our teacher guide to look at how this particular unit fits into the scope and sequence of learning, what students will learn in this unit before, or in the unit before this unit, and what students will learn in the unit after. As you can see on this planning portion of our template, there are 4 different categories that are covered within the skills strand, and they are listed here. Sound spelling correspondences, reading, writing, and grammar. There is also a space on your unit internalization template to record different routines that are used throughout the skills strand, such as chaining or spelling trees. So what I'm going to do now is take you to the yearly scope and sequence. This is found in the teacher resource section in Appendix B. Appendix B is only in Unit 1 of your skills teacher guide. So make sure that you remember that you will access this in Unit 1 for the rest of the year because it is a yearly scope and sequence. So let's go there now. Again, this is a teacher resource. It's at the end of my teacher resources. Here's Appendix B, and you'll see that each unit that is included in grade 1 is listed here. Because we are focusing on the first unit of study in our unit internalization planning today, we don't have a previous unit to look at, but we know that Unit 1 is reviewing those sound spelling correspondences and foundational skills that were covered in kindergarten. So for my planning purposes, I decided to focus on Unit 1 and then also look ahead to Unit 2 so I can see how Unit 1 helps support my students and builds them up for success in those Unit 2 foundational skills. So in my planning template, I decided to list it by unit. I again looked at the sound spelling correspondences, looked at what I was covering in Unit 1 and what would be covered in Unit 2 to help me build upon those skills. I did the same for reading and writing. There were no grammar components listed, and then I did the same for routines. Again, this will look different depending on where you are within the school year. Unit 1 will be a little bit different. But if I'm planning for Unit 4, I will look at Unit 3, and then I will also look at Unit 5 to complete this portion. As you can see, it is so important to have a big picture understanding of your unit before diving into the individual lessons and lesson planning. This big picture will help you understand how each lesson fits into the scope and sequence of the unit. It will also help you understand how the unit builds in order to set your students up for success throughout. As I stated earlier, utilizing this unit internalization template will get easier and easier the more and more you do it. You will get more and more comfortable with the different components that are included within your unit introduction, and you will grow to love that unit introduction because of the wealth of information that is provided in it. Make sure you read through it in its entirety and then use this unit internalization template to help guide you to plan for each specific step within your unit. Thank you for walking through a skills unit internalization with me, and happy planning.